And yeah, thank you to Tech Hub and the sponsors. I'd love to understand just who is in the audience a little bit. Can I get a show of hands for technical people in the room, people that are building bots or software otherwise? Great, okay. And anybody from what we would, as an agency, probably call client side. So like enterprises that would hire agencies for work or that are currently looking at process automation or chatbots or that kind of thing. Okay. And then any sort of product manager, project managers out here. Cool, okay, great mix. Awesome. So yeah, as Tom mentioned, my name is Victoria, and I run a small boutique data science and AI consultancy called Springbok AI. There's about 40 of us, mostly machine learning PhDs and a variation of backgrounds. And really what we do is we build high-performance software for enterprise. Now I'm not here to give you guys a sales pitch, just to give you guys an overview, where am I coming from with this. And what I want to talk to you guys, what I would like to kind of transport to you guys is really the learnings from deploying these machine learning-based projects in an enterprise setting from a business perspective. So how, essentially, what are the learnings from the development perspective that you can take away from the business side, and how those two go together, and how to make your projects really successful. Kind of taking a bit of a scientific approach, so to speak. First, I want to just go through our basic assumptions that we're having as the premise here. So one, you've already sold the project. Two, it's an AI or conversational AI implementation project. Number three, the data security side of things is sorted, which obviously is a massive ball ache, as I'm sure you guys know from experience. And then number four, you want to stay in business. And then also, so looking at your company or your boss's key objectives, or also your personal key objectives, depending on where you kind of sit in the project. One is you want to get paid, potentially in future you want to get paid in euros. And then also you want to get repeat business and or get referred. So those assumptions out of the way, how are you going to do that? So essentially build a kick-ass product, deliver a kick-ass service, and impress the client. So what that means is essentially making your project manager and sort of champion on the client side look good, and also feel like a boss. But a little bit more on that later. Okay, so let's get started. Three main things I want to talk about, go through them one by one. So first things first, work from first principles. So think about, what do we know to be true when you're going into the project? So the first thing I'd look at is, what is the client's vision? And often, this seems like such a simple thing, but often it's a matter of, A, clarifying that with the client, and then articulating it back to them. So an example that I can give you guys from a client that we worked with, and this is essentially something that we extrapolated from the conversations with them. This wasn't actually something that they told us line by line, but this is something we fed back to them, and it was really powerful for them to see how we saw their vision based on the interactions that we had in the workshops that we had. So for this client, it's a big FMCG company in Germany. We articulated to them the long-term vision is for Company X to become a data-driven manufacturing business that effectively leverages intelligent, self-learning, and self-improving systems to maximize its resources for the benefit of people, profit, and the environment. Of course, this is like very corporate speak, right? But this is the kind of thing that, just think of it from the perspective of what would they want to put on their presentations to look good in front of their own boss. Like, oh my God, yeah, we had this. We had these workshops, and now we're doing this project, and this is the vision that we're working towards with this exciting new project, and aren't you excited, and shouldn't we get more budget? And that's essentially what the project manager, who's in charge, your champion, wants to be able to create in his boss, to sort of create that excitement as well. So next, how does the project fit in with their short to medium term objectives? And what I mean by that is it really depends what stage the client is at in terms of understanding why they need chatbots, or why they need AI, or why they need to automate their processes. So we've sometimes worked with clients where we've literally asked, is your key objective in this project to do an AI project, or is it to actually solve the problem? And they would genuinely say, this one client, it was clear as day, he genuinely said back to us, it's to find some AI project to do. So they weren't actually even about solving the problem. It was like, that's a bonus if we can solve the problem, but we need to like spend our AI budget, and I really want this AI, I really want this AI project. So can you do something and make sure it has some AI so like, we get the bonus points, and my boss is happy. So, it sounds really, really obvious, but just make sure you drill down into what is actually the objective at hand. Next, what are the motivations of the individual? So usually this is, the important person here is your champion again. And it's about understanding, is it that they're looking for recognition? Are they looking for a pay rise, a promotion? Do they just want to look good in front of their boss to get onto another project? Do they want to lead a bigger team? Like, what is it that they really want to get out of it? And what I found really is that there's no harm in actually just asking that question directly. Like, it seems like a bit of an awkward thing to ask, but it's actually so helpful to just ask, like, by the way, just so I know, where you're at, like, what would you ideally want to get out of this? Like, what does success look like for you? How can I make sure you look good? And just having that super open and transparent conversation, we found really makes such a difference. And then also, of course, understanding the desired KPIs on the client side. So, by how much, what do they want to improve the performance, or decrease the amount of steps in the process, or whatever it is that they want to get out of it. And this is kind of much more basic, like kind of project scoping stuff. But of course, it just needs to be clear, and then you have a really good place to start from. So yeah, that's the first principle side of things. So number 2 is basically communicating what you want and need to make the project really successful. So I'm going to go through these kind of one by one with some examples, but really it's about understanding roles, being clear on use cases, understanding the quality and quantity of the data that's needed, and also what the contingencies are. So in terms of understanding roles, this is an example of a RACI chart that we work with, and this is from an actual project. Have any of you guys heard of RACI before? Can I see a show of hands? Awesome. Okay, so just to really briefly explain, because I see that there's not every hand is raised. So RACI essentially stands for Responsible, Accountable, Contributor, and Informed. And there's a few variations of this that you might have seen, but this is the one that we work with. And so you have the roles at the top, the different sort of types of teams involved, and then the different phases of the project. And this is really great because if somebody needs to be swapped in and out of the team, either on your side if you're the person building it, or if on the client side they have people swapping in and out of the project, it's really easy for people to just get an overview of who do I speak to, who's the accountable person here, or like who do I need to CC into emails, or whatever the sort of process is there. But also this is something that your sort of champion or project manager on client side loves to show management. I mean, this is like the thing that makes management like literally drool, like, oh, amazing, they're so prepared, So yeah, this, I mean, just generally charts, matrices, I mean, it's great. Do lots of these. Then number 2, yeah, really quite basic, but just important, clarity on use cases. Just make sure, reiterating that back and forth. And this is something that you should be doing in this sort of scoping session with the client, really. Then quality and quantity of data. So something that we don't, like we can't even say often enough, and we say this at the very beginning, we say this in the middle, and we say this towards the end when there's potential, when we can see that the potential discrepancies of expectations versus reality. Garbage in is garbage out, right? And anyone here that's worked with data and has worked with shit data knows exactly what I'm talking about. There's no way to produce an accurate software if you don't have enough data and it's not good data. So you need to be really clear on how much you need in order to achieve the accuracy that the client wants. And as long as that's communicated well, that expectation, meeting that expectation is actually quite manageable. And then also making sure that you communicate what contingencies are. So that may be data, that may be timings, that may be interactions or meetings with people on the team, or like even holidays. So for example, this is a project plan with one of our clients, Henkel in Germany. So this was kind of the timeline that we worked out with them. They've obviously put it into like nice corporate design and colors. to present back to their team. And then what we did kind of on top of this, and this is something that we didn't have to do, but we did, and they loved it. So just something that I'd like to kind of give to you guys as some advice or a recommendation is to essentially, as you can see, maybe like just mapping like this bit on top of here, or vice versa, is showing like which part of the project has contingencies and what they are. And then essentially the requirements, like requirement A, requirement D, E, whatever, sort of having those on a list for the client to see for which phase of the project do I need which requirement, like when do I need to deliver what to Springbok AI for them to get their job done and for us to be on track. Does that make sense? Yeah? Awesome, cool. And then also, I know I've been kind of talking about this project manager on client side. It really is so important that you just have that one person that you can speak to. And you know, as a corporate or big company, to provide that one person that your agency can just go to that will manage everything. Otherwise, the communication just gets very muddled and complicated. And then number 3, so making your project manager look good. So there's a few different ways to do this. I know I've already gone into some bits and pieces before. But kind of overall, the first thing I'd say is just plan a time buffer. I mean, I know, you know, projects, we always try to plan a buffer, but whatever you plan, just plan an extra 20%, especially if it's not just the development side, but also the people management and processes and paperwork and sign off. So yeah, when you have that timeline, just whatever it is, plan that 20% buffer. Also, preempting potential problems. So this again just goes to the transparency and the managing expectations, but to just sit down both with your own team, but also with the client and say, okay, what kind of things could go wrong and how could we preempt those ahead of time? Like, who do we need to get on side beforehand? How do we set that up so that if we do have that issue, that we can solve that as soon as possible? And then presenting your findings. So this is sort of part of the showing the process, which I'll get to in a minute. But really, I mean, just diagrams, guys, diagrams. They love diagrams. Anything you can visualize, do it. Like any data you have, you can create graphs. I mean, they love putting stuff on charts. And then if you want some bonus points, have a chart that moves. Seriously, guys. It's great. Or like something that's clickable. Like if anybody on your team can get a bit of proficiency on Power BI, I mean, oh, seriously, love. And then next, I drew upon this briefly a second ago. Show your process. This is really something they love to see. So, I mean, everybody loves that design thinking process with Post-it notes. Not necessarily that that's the right approach to use, but they just love being able to see, you know, where you've come from and where you're going, and to show in a presentation to the client, even when you're kind of in the final stages. Look, these are the humble beginnings. Then we did, you know, the prioritization exercise from that initial brainstorm. Sorry. Cool. Then we did that prioritization exercise, and then from there we chose like the 2 top problems or challenges to work on, and we scoped those out in detail, and then we developed the project from there. They just absolutely love understanding what the process is, because to them, in a way, the process that data science, AI consultancies, or chatbot development companies, or software development in general, it's for them it's a bit of a black box sometimes, we find. And they really love the demystification of that, but also just understanding like what actually happens behind the scenes and feeling part of that process. It's like making them feel like they've really contributed, and I mean they have, right? They've literally told you what it is that they need, and you've walked them through it. So just being able to present that to management as well, they really enjoy that. And then yeah, understanding your audience. So we found when we go in to present, for example, milestones of a project, we often have to do 2 or 3 different presentations depending on who's in the room. So obviously the EXCO, as in the executive committee that have a 20-minute slot to get the presentation, will see a very different presentation to the room full of technical people, or the room full of like the business, like the subject matter experts and the business people. So yeah, it's really about just tailoring your content to the audience. Again, sort of quite obvious, but usually what you can do is create just a master presentation and then cut out stuff and add stuff on to it, depending on who you're speaking to. And then, last but not least, making your client presentations look professional. So when we did our last presentation, I think we probably spent a good 4 or 5 days getting all the content on the slides, knowing how we wanted it to all sort of look and feel in general, then giving it to a designer. And that's literally a matter of 350 pounds or something, just spent on just making it look incredible, having it on brand for the client, and just again making them just look really good, everything fits to how they want it to look. It really is money very well spent if you can afford it. Yeah. So to summarize, how to have a successful delivery of a project, a machine learning project in enterprise. I obviously went into a bit of detail, and this is just a quick summary overview. But the first thing we talked about is working from first principles. So what do you really know to be true from the vision side, the objectives in the client, etc. How can you make sure that you achieve the things that the client wants you to achieve? Number 2, communicating or sharing what you need to make the project successful. We talked about, for example, the garbage in, garbage out diagram there. And then also RACI, understanding rules, etc. And third, making your project manager look and feel really, really good and be excited to work with you. Not least because they'll be the ones that are, extending the project with you guys, recommending you to other departments, and kind of going back to what I said at the beginning, if your objective is to not only get paid A, which is sort of basic minimum delivery of what you promised, but actually if you over-deliver getting repeat business, which is always easier than winning new business, then these things should get you part of the way there. So yeah, thank you so much.